What's your experience from seeing paranormal creatures? Redditor 91. So I have a nightmare monster protector friend called T4. Story: when I was around 15-16 years old, I had a dream where I was on the actual bed I was sleeping on and could feel something under it, so I got up, in the dream, to see what was there and just bent down. I could see a shapeless white form curled up, like it's ready to pounce. I felt a vague confusion in the monster's behavior and asked what it wanted. It wouldn't talk, but I could just understand that it wanted to stay under my bed. I agreed to it staying and told it that it can stay if it is not going to hurt me. That was the end of that dream. The name T4 somehow formed in my head by itself, which referred to the thing. And from then on, whenever I have a bad dream, this T4 just barges into the dream out of nowhere in different forms and shapes, and somehow helps me get through the nightmares. It's like a dream antivirus I installed unknowingly. Redditor 92. Once when I was around 17, I was driving on a back road in KY, and something jumped in front of my car, then flew away. It leapt like a deer, but literally had wings. The wings were clearly visible, and feathered. It was the size of a Great Dane or smallish deer. It jumped from one side of the road to the center of the road, and took off upwards. I had a passenger in the car and can't remember who it was. I've asked all my friends and no one remembers this. I still have no idea what it was. Redditor 93. Buddy of mine and myself were on his porch and he lived in a heavily wooded area. We were both talking and laughing when I had to stop in complete fear because I vividly thought I'd seen a large shadowy winged creature scurry quickly toward us and the porch running on its hand as if a large chimpanzee, but with huge wings and moving faster than a normal animal. Here's the other part. Friend is freaked out at what I've claimed to have seen because he assures me that he'd just seen some kind of Mothman Jersey devil shit drop from the sky and crouch exactly where I'd seen the thing seemingly spawn from to come at us. This is the only supernatural thing that has occurred in my life and it still legitimately gives me both of us I think the willies just thinking about it. The buddy at one point I knew suffered from sleep paralysis. I've wondered since if there could have been a correlation to his symptoms and this event. Redditor 94. I have a few. The main one was when I was 14 or 15 my dog went missing in 35 weather. For 7 years she slept in my bed every night because I had night terrors. My first night without her I was having a bad dream, rolled over and felt her laying next to me. I put my face into her fur right behind her ear and started to pet her, remembered she was missing, jumped up and turned on my lamp. My bed was empty and I knew she wasn't just missing. Redditor 95. Mostly due to the bad luck of being the only person sober I got tasked with the lovely opportunity of patrolling a controlled burn we had been doing earlier in the day. Locals started calling the ranger station claiming the fire had jumped the line and was burning out of control, which was obviously untrue, but still the ranger called us and someone had to go check it out. By the time I drove out there it was around 11 at night and I had a good maybe 4 miles of line to walk around in a giant circle. It was pretty damn eerie. There was barely any moon, a fine fog mist had settled in and all of the burn piles are now just smoldering glowing heaps of embers. I start walking along the narrow fire line and I'm trying to orient myself to where I was during the day, but it's difficult cause the visibility is so bad and headlamp isn't much help aside from seeing the path in front of me. About a mile and I start getting in my head real bad, so I pulled out my phone and put a podcast on speaker to calm me down. A few minutes later I get that weird primal feeling that I'm being watched. I'm not alone. I started looking around and I can kinda see the silhouette of something on all fours right on the border of where everything fades into black background. Not sure what it was. The surprising rational part of took over and yelled, "Hey, duck off at it." And then it stood up on 2 legs. It was taller than I thought, skinnier, and its limbs were too long. It just looked wrong. I seriously have never felt that sort of terror before or since. I've never seen anything that breaks my concept of reality like this did. I turned around and hauled ass across the burn area back to the truck as fast as I could. I'm seriously lucky I didn't trip in a stump hole or get burned. My guess is that it was a starving bear with mange. When they loose their fur they look really weird and their limbs look a lot longer. There were a lot of gross sights in the area and a lot of the runoff was poisoning the local wildlife. Honestly, a starving sick bear is probably a bigger threat than any monster I could have dreamed up. Redditor 96. My husband and I were traveling and stopped at a hotel in New Mexico. I was pregnant at the time, so I was always getting up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. I got up and had to walk around the bed to go to the restroom, which was on the other side of wall. As I came around the bed next to where my husband was sleeping, I saw that the hotel room door was slightly ajar and there was a dog laying on the floor. I could clearly see the dog laying there. It was looking right at me. The dog blocked part of the light coming in through the door. I started hitting my hubby, telling him to wake up while I was making eye contact with the dog. I told him the door is open and there is a dog in the room. He jumps up, looks at the door and says, "Holy shit." He turns to find the switch to the light while I jumped back in bed. Once the light is on, he finds the door closed and locked. There was no dog there. We saw the same thing. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen, and it still gives me chills today. We both know that there was a dog there. Redditor 97, I do not believe in supernatural stuff. But this night gave me the heebie-jeebies. I grew up out in the country in the southeast US in a ranch-style house with an open carport on the end. After parking the car, we'd enter through a screened-in porch and then enter the side door of the house. The door of the screened-in porch was a storm door with one of those pneumatic closers that was supposed to stop the door from slamming shut. I think ours was improperly installed because it would very quickly make the door almost slam shut and then slowly close the last inch or so. More than once this door slammed on my trailing bare foot and it hurt like hell, so we knew to get in the door quick. Why it was never fixed or adjusted, I don't know, but it was just one of those fixtures in our summer, barefoot country lives. Late one summer night, 2 a.m. When I was about 11 or 12, my dog is acting like there's something outside near the carport side of the house. I have 5 siblings and both parents in the house, but none are stirring from the noise. I get up to investigate and go the side door near the carport. I open the side door into the porch and my dog's still barking and acting way protective. He almost never acted like this unless there were unknown people around, which has me concerned. Sometime hunters would hunt without permission on our land and walk by the house at odd times during the night. I flick on the carport lights and floodlights and everything is completely lit up. For whatever reason there's no car parked in the carport that night, so I have a full unobstructed view and the dog is getting more agitated. I don't see anything unusual. I step out into the porch, go up to the porch door and push the door open wide and hold it open, and stand in the doorway, and I'm looking through the carport, which is very open, just brick columns on the corners, no walls, looking out at an unobstructed view of the yard and the edge of the woods by our house, and I'm thinking, what are you growling at? Then as I am standing there looking for a stray dog, or raccoon or something similar, I get this sudden overwhelming sense of danger. And that's when I see what I could only describe as a faint, very faint, person-sized shape appear 10 feet away from me right in the middle of the carport, and it had what looked like the appearance of someone running, sprinting towards me. In a flash it was right up on me. I immediately backed up 3 big steps from the door I was holding open, to the side door of the house. The dog is still growling. Every hair on my neck is standing straight up and I'm in fight mode. I'm breathing fast, or maybe not at all. Adrenaline is spiked. But I don't see the shape now though. And that's when I see it. The door that always slams shut is still being held open. Duck this. I instantly open the house door and get the dog inside the house, slam the house door shut and lock it. I'm freaked out. There's fabric curtains over the window in the house door and I slide the fabric over to look at the porch door. It stays open a moment longer and then it swings closed. Stops just shy of slamming, and then it releases and shuts as it had always done before. I didn't sleep a wink. Redditor 98, I've got 3 stories about the family dog saving my life when I was an infant. As far as I'm concerned, that dog was some kind of a guardian spirit. 1. When my mother was pregnant with me, a door-to-door salesman visited the house when she was alone. She didn't feel like talking to him, so she told him to go away, and instead he shoved his foot in the door and started to push the door open. She yelled for the dog, and the dog came flying down the hallway barking, scaring the salesman away and following him outside and chasing him all the way down the street. Later that night on the news, My parents saw a story about a woman that had been our pet and murdered by someone posing as a door-to-door salesman just a few streets away. 2. When I was a few weeks old, my parents were sleeping in their room and the dog would not stop barking at them. When they tried to go calm the dog down, she ran out of their room and into mine, where my parents saw me lying in my crib almost completely blue. They quickly determined I was choking and were able to pull a piece of plaster that had fallen off the ceiling out of my mouth. 3. A few months later, nearly the same thing happened. My parents were sleeping in their room, and the dog barked at them and woke them up. They followed her into my room again, where they found me with over a 100-degree fever. They rushed me to the hospital and the hospital was able to get things back under control. Redditor 99, I'm still not sure what to make of an experience I had several years ago on the fringes of a small remote indigenous community in the Kimberley in Western Australia. My wife and I were walking in the early evening in the very last of the light towards a huge red rock escarpment along a pretty isolated track out of town. The track had a fence running alongside it and thick native grasses about waist height on either side. Most evenings for the few months we were living there we took a long walk until the light got low before turning around and heading back to the community, so we knew the track pretty well. We pushed on a little longer and later this particular evening and witnessed something we couldn't explain. We crossed the ridge line and we were looking down a low incline to a patch of thin scraggly trees. About 10 meters from the trees was a group of very large, very dark, thick-shaped objects crossing the fence in front of us, cutting across the track. I can still remember the heavy thud of my heart instantly thumping twice as hard and the look of terror on my wife's face. The creatures were much taller than me. I'm 6'3", were moving in a cooperative sort of way, easily moved over the fence and through the long grass and seemed to pause only briefly, almost effortlessly when dealing with the fence. The light was getting so low it was very hard to make out a definite outline or exact shape, but there is nothing in the even close to these things in the Australian bush. I couldn't tell if they noticed us, but they didn't seem all that bothered by our presence if they did. We were able to watch very clearly for several seconds as the group cleared the fence and kept going. We turned and went back the way we had come, looking over our shoulders constantly and checked what each other had seen as we quickly headed back. The next day we spoke to a group of elders who looked shocked when we told them the story. They spoke among themselves for some time and we were given very clear instructions to stay away from that area because we had witnessed spirits crossing the land. Being pushy white fellas, we of course pushed them for more details or some other sort of explanation, but none was given and we were told not to back there for a while because it's very dangerous. The elders completely believed our story. My wife is a journalist and I'm a documentary filmmaker. We're not the sort of people to make up experiences. Neither of us have shared this story previously. We were completely sober. It's a dry community. I still get chills when I think about it. I would estimate they were the length of a very large bull, but at least twice the height, were able to navigate the fence without any difficulty and moved in a very purposeful way. Sorry this is so long. Redditor 100, when I was very young the family cat died. For a couple of years after, we would see a very similar looking cat roaming our backyard every week or so. One time we caught it roaming while we were outside and it ran through a row of trees into our neighbor's yard. We went over there and it had disappeared. It was probably just a neighborhood cat that looked like ours, but we kids all thought it was the ghost of our cat enjoying the afterlife in our backyard. Redditor 101, dunno what I saw was, but it was in Alaska. I was on a hunt with my dad, uncle, and brother and a couple days in, during the night, I woke up in the wall tent and needed to take a leak. So out I go. Now we were up on a hill for a better vantage point to see game and I decided while I released myself I'd like a view. I'm standing there looking out over the valley lit by the midnight sun when I hear some rocks falling down the slope behind me. I turn, thinking it was someone in our party, but farther up on a cliff behind me is a man. Right at the middle of a 200-foot cliff. This made no sense because we were about 50-60 miles from the nearest village down a bunch of random sloughs and channels. There was no way some random guy was just near our camp like that. As I watched, he was moving across the cliff then disappeared in thin air. No clue who or what it was. Redditor 102, okay, late to the game here and not very spooky, But it's weird, so here goes. I have been severely allergic to cats my entire life, coupled with my asthma. I couldn't even sit in a house with a cat in it. My eyes would swell shut, I'd wheeze, my nose would run like a faucet, and I would need treatment immediately. I lived that way for 43 years. I love all animals, but I had to deal with keeping my distance from cats. I always had dogs, but never a cat. So we have a daughter who is my late mother's namesake. Around the age of 5 she became obsessed with cats, begged for a cat, always meowing at me. I felt terrible about it, but it wasn't debatable. I could not get her a pet cat even when after Hurricane Sandy hit and there were rats infesting our waterfront neighborhood, and I wished we could get a cat. I knew I couldn't, so last May I come home from a job and my daughter is running around outside with this little, skinny ginger and white cat. The neighbors are all laughing because this little thing is skin and bones, but she's running after my 8-year-old like a dog, following her everywhere, and my daughter is walking around with her cradled in her arms like a baby, and the cat is loving it. By nightfall it was clear the kitty wasn't leaving the yard, so I fed her and made her a bed outside. This worked out fine for a few days, but there was a storm coming the next day. I made the little cat a plastic bin enclosure to ride out the storm, but being coastal, I was worried. I sat and petted her and did not have a reaction. That night when the storm rolled in, I took Kitty into our house. I couldn't bear to leave her out in the wind and rain. Kitty never left, and I have never had an allergic reaction to her. She knew her way around a house and slept cuddled in my daughter's arms. The rats we had in the basement left like thieves, and the night after Kitty made it known that she was an all-star mouser, she also managed to have 5 kittens that we kept. I have no allergic reaction to these kittens either. I will always wonder where Kitty came from, this beautiful, perfect little cat who latched on immediately to my little girl. Stray cats are usually wary, especially of children. I sort of think that maybe my mom decided to spoil her namesake from heaven and sent Kitty to us, a carefully chosen, tame and patient cat with no health issues, fleas or mites, who loved being snuggled and cleared our house of vermin in one day, and is the same shade of ginger as my mother's hair. Redditor 103, when I was 18, I had a boxer lab puppy. He was only 6 months at the time. We were playing in the living room with his favorite rope, when out of absolute nowhere his head and entire body turned towards my dining room table. At first I thought maybe he was just doing random, off-task puppy things, or he heard something in that general area. No. His entire demeanor changed. Fur sticking up. Lips and teeth showing. I tried to calm him, but something was over there. Something he was protecting me from. I started walking towards the table to figure out why he was acting so strangely, and he went crazy, so I sat on the couch to observe him. I shit you not, my puppy started snapping at whatever it was, like it was walking towards him. Growling and walking backwards. My house had always had very creepy and unexplained events, so it definitely wasn't out of the ordinary. Redditor 104, my cat was hit by a car and died. My husband and I were completely broken up about it. Days after Kitty's death I started to see glimpses of my cat in our apartment. Our apartment was long and short in width. It was basically a long hallway that connected some rooms. More often than not my peripheral vision picked up on familiar movements in the familiar spots my cat had once occupied. I never spoke of it to my spouse because, not going to admit I think I'm seeing our dead cat. One night the husband and I were drinking and freely sharing, and through this we discovered we were both seeing our dead cat. As we verbally processed this loudly, we both suddenly saw a jumpy blur down the hall. It was a mouse. We were seeing mice, the mice that our cat had been keeping away when he was alive. Redditor 105, when I was a little kid, sometimes I would walk home because it was only about 5 blocks. One day I left late, and it was raining. The crossing guard had already gone home and I was in a hurry to get across the street. There were a couple of cars parked in front of the school near the crosswalk, making it hard for me to see both ways. I did, however, see a little black and white cat sitting on the sidewalk just out of the corner of my eye. I turned and hesitated for maybe 2 seconds. Had I started crossing the street instead, the car speeding down the road would have hit me head on. I hadn't seen a cat when I walked out to the sidewalk, though. And there wasn't one when I looked back. Redditor 106, I have this weird story. It happened a few years back when I was a young teenager. I was watching TV with my parent when I saw something out the window. I was on the couch and had a view of that window, but my parents were facing away and didn't see what I'm about to describe. Just past the fence in the neighbor's yard there was this green glowing thing just hovering. I don't think those neighbors were home, so I assumed they didn't see anything. They've since moved away, so I haven't gotten to ask to them about it. The green thing was almost like a lantern. But it was made out of leaves. It looked like a bunch of maple leaves stuck together around a flickering candle in the center. The top of the lantern was a sharp point where all the tips of the leaves met. I saw it was mostly fresh green leaves, but there were also some dry brown ones on the outside. So imagine leaves arranged in a circle almost like a wreath around a flame. It was flickering through all the leaves, casting this beautiful green light around it. The lantern thing hovered for a few seconds as I stared at it in shock and then floated out of sight behind the fence. The shock started to wear off and I flipped. Shit! I screamed and pointed to the window, but the lantern had vanished. Since I was having problems with panic attacks at that point in my life, my parents were quick to reassure me that it was just an everyday object that I couldn't immediately identify. I described it and they figured someone had just thrown a glow stick. No. After calming down, I went to bed and tried to forget about the incident. I still think about it a lot and have found no rational explanation about what I saw. Anyway, I wanted to see if anyone has had a similar experience. I've been trying to draw this lantern thing, but I just can't do it very well. If I ever get around to making a drawing that really captures what it looked like, I'll be sure to post it. And lastly, sorry for the weird sentence flow. It's late and I'm half asleep. Redditor 107. When I was 3 or 4, I had an episode of steroid psychosis, which is basically just a bad acid trip. I can vividly remember being in a waiting room in someone's home while grandma was arguing with the front desk in this house. Out of nowhere, a white cat showed up and started talking to me plain as day. Nothing frightening about it, but I was absolutely terrified. I'm 24 now and I am still uneasy around white fluffy cats. Avid dog person because of it. Redditor 108. This may not be the most magical story, but it helped me through a really rough time in my life. When I was around 13, I was having the worst year of my life up until that point anyway. My grandfather passed away. My brother was in a traumatic car crash. My sister passed away from a separate car crash. My mother was very sick, and after all that, my best friend, a very large black lab, had to be put to sleep because of inoperable cancer at the base of his neck. This last incident was the straw that almost broke my spirit. A few nights after he was put to sleep, I remember crying until I passed out from exhaustion. That night I had a dream that I still remember vividly. In the dream, I was sitting in the kitchen on the floor for some reason. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my dog Zeus come walking around the corner. I knew without a doubt in my mind he was saying goodbye and everything would be okay. After I had that dream, it made a world of difference and helped me cope with everything that had happened. Redditor 109. I was hiking somewhere in southern NJ, around the Pine Barrens. Now, the wilderness in New Jersey isn't large, but when I was going through a rough patch in high school, I'd go down there and get lost for a week or so. My mom had gotten me a hiking buddy, a small shepherd mutt, Rocky, since she felt better that I walked with a dog. Rocky and I took a long time to mesh. I was a stubborn teenager, he was a stupid 5-year-old mutt who had no manners, and we didn't have a clue how to communicate. I could never let him off leash, but one day we're hiking on a trail that is seriously so tight my pack was hitting brush on either side. Around a bend, Rocky suddenly went crazy and ripped his leash out of my hand. He took off barking and I followed him as fast as I could. With the trail being tight and carrying 50 pounds of gear, it took a few minutes to catch up with him. He led me through the woods and we finally stopped, and I didn't notice it at first, but he was completely calm, just staring off into the distance. I followed his gaze and saw the biggest coyote in my life, easily double the size of any I've seen before or since. This thing just stared at us. I couldn't move, I was shitting myself, thinking this is how I die. Rocky wasn't moving, whining, barking, nothing. What felt like hours but was probably only a few minutes, we had a staring contest with this giant beast. And then it just got up, sauntered off with a yip. I stayed in those woods for another 2 days, and Rocky was a different dog. I felt like I had a religious experience, and did a lot of thinking over those 2 days. I came to terms with some things, and when I emerged and met my mom for pickup, our relationship even seemed to have a different air to it. I have no clue if what we saw was real, but the experience helped me during one of the toughest times of my life, and I've considered nature my church ever since. Redditor 110, alright well shitpost I'm feeling risky tonight. And by shitpost I mean probably embarrass myself as an atheist. Basically I was in a graveyard when I was 17 with my girlfriend I know cool right. What awesome teenagers. We were both into the paranormal and I convinced her to come with me to a graveyard to see if we could stir up paranormal activity as I was, and still am, kinda half and half on it. There was a lot of putzing around and honestly we got into a lot of bickering back and forth for no reason. I guess we were both kind of unnerved. She was scared, I was annoyed since there wasn't any reason to be. Honestly it was one of the calmest places I've ever been. However my heart jumped out of my chest for a moment when I had to turn a corner. For what couldn't have even been more than a second, I saw the stark image of a large, grungy-looking wolf with piercing yellow eyes and fangs. It was akin to something from the game Bloodborne. Like this thing, was fucking large. Nearly my size almost. It made me feel tiny. I honestly don't even know if I trust my own senses. It could've merely been a trick of the shadows or anything. But in my mind it was very clear. And I've never forgotten those yellow eyes. Redditor 111, I'm incredibly sensitive to the other realm of things to the point where for a long time I had a guardian spirit who'd stand in the way of the entities that could really duck me up though if I'm not actively practicing it lays dormant. But I live in an area where it's pretty rich with spirits, entities, really anything you can imagine. I had a lot of trouble when I first moved up here because they wouldn't stop bothering me lots of different things but mainly nature entities and spirits that didn't necessarily have a form more than an aura which made sense because well the house I lived in had just been made in the forest and stuff was destroyed. They'd follow me around for a while and while it scared the shit out of me to see them and feel their presence which was very angry after a while of appeasement the angry feeling went away. Now there's just what I call house spiders. They are these black shadowy spider-like entities that just kinda scurry around places considered homes or hearths. I believe they are there for a reason. One of the people I know in the area has mentioned that they're common and connected to the culture of the area he, and many people who live here, are Ojibwe. I am not. So that's my experience with anything animal-like. Redditor 112. My parents live in the south in an urban city. My dad works 1.5 hours away from home and takes a kind of rural commute to get there on back highways to avoid traffic. One night, he was coming home late at night and hit a deer at 60-70 miles per hour. He doesn't remember the impact, the car stopped and the airbag popped out. He's not sure how long he was out but the cops thought it had only been 10-15 minutes before someone came upon him. Crazy thing his car was totaled and he suffered no injuries aside from a bruise where the airbag popped his arm. No animal was found, but he remembered seeing the deer and trying to swerve to avoid impact positive he'd hit it. So quite possibly, the deer staggered away and died. He doesn't know about animal blood. BC car was towed at night. Flash forward a few months, my mom wakes up to make breakfast and there is a big muscular buck in the backyard staring her down from 20 feet away. She took a pic and sent it to me. Deer is real but here's the weird thing. My parents have lived in this city for over 25 years. Yard is fenced 4 feet reg wire fence. There are no deer in the area. They get turtles, raccoons, possum and feral cats. My mom immediately went to call my dad. BC she had no idea how the deer ended up there and she was worried it couldn't get out. When she came back to the window, the deer was gone. I don't know what it means. The deer in the yard was real, but I'm stumped as to how it got in or out and whether it was there to send a message on behalf of its friend. Lol. Redditor 113. My grandparents' old house now my uncle's house has had at least 5 people die in it. My grandpa, plus the wife and 3-4 kids from the previous owners that we know of. Mother died of an accident in the kitchen, the oldest son hung himself from the stairs, the youngest died of pneumonia. One of the middle kids died of complications with diabetes. My great aunt has a dog that's the sweetest most loving little cocker spaniel you'll ever meet but it isn't allowed inside that house anymore because it loses its mind and becomes psychotically aggressive in that house, especially in the kitchen. Dog won't go near the stairs and will bite if you try to bring it up there. I never liked sleeping in the west upstairs bedroom. Felt like something that hated me was watching. Whatever that dog saw, I believe the dog. Redditor 114, I'm not sure what category this fits under, but here it is anyway. I'm a triathlete, so I do a bunch of running and a good deal of it is on trails in the vast expanse of woods down the road from me. Couple years ago I was heading out for a run after work. I got out later than I wanted and a snowstorm was coming, so when I got there it was dusk, cloudy and gray, but it was also that pre-storm calm where not a branch is moving and it's dead silent. I figured I had a couple hours before being in the woods was a bad idea and about 45 till functional dark, so I brought my headlamp and figured I'd come back in the dark. A very light snow began to fall and it was so still and quiet that I could hear the hiss of snow landing on the dry leaves. Basically, this run was going to be ducking awesome. I love these conditions and they are rare. I happily saunter off down the trail. I've run this trail about 1,000 times over the last 8 years since I've found it. I can practically run it with my eyes closed. These woods and the creatures in them are familiar. Zero cause for concern. I get about 1 kilometer down the trail and I get a little hair on the back of the neck nervous. This isn't an uncommon feeling when trail running near dark by myself. It's natural to get a little creeped out here and there when you're alone in the woods and the sun's setting. And in these woods there's old mini grave sites from colonial era scattered around to add some salt to the experience. I've been in these woods forever, but there are still some sections of trail that just wig me out, and I'm so used to it now I just accept it. Thing is, this section isn't one of them. This section is friendly, so I'm a little caught off guard by being nervous at this point at the run. I do my best to shake it off and keep running, but I get about 20 feet farther when my body just stops running. Half my brain is like, dude, don't ruin a great run, this is stupid, there is literally zero reason for this, and half my brain is just humming with instinct. Suddenly I have to pee. I assess myself, my entire physical body is in defense mode and it's 137. Instinct that's doing it. I stop and pee and the don't ruin a great run half of my brain is getting quieter and quieter and the instinct defense part is getting louder and louder. And the rational side gets one last shot at control and I try to just keep running because this is dumb to be this scared, and I take 2 steps and it's like running into a wall. There's no ducking way I can run even another step in that direction. This feeling of hopelessness set in, that was dark and final. I've never felt something like that before. The rational part of my brain was silenced. You know when you're a kid and you get scared in your own basement, and you get that feeling like something's going to grab you any second so you can't run up the stairs fast enough? This was that X1000 as an adult. I couldn't move. I felt like if I did, every leaf crunch was like thunder and all I wanted to do was stand still and disappear. I stood there for a solid 60 seconds, just like a deer in headlights, right there on my most familiar trail that I've run 1,000 times in all weather conditions and at most hours of the day and night. I was petrified, but of nothing that I could see. But in my mind I could see it exactly. I knew exactly what it was. Ahead of me was a small knoll, the trail heads over the top and down the other side into a thicket of bushes and pine trees. I could mentally see exactly what was there: a bear, hungry and trying to get one last meal before this snowstorm, and it could smell me and it was waiting there, wondering if such an easy meal as myself would wander over that knoll. I have no idea if that was the reality, but my brain just painted that picture for me and I didn't question it. What I was feeling was predator-prey mind meld, only I was the prey this time. I turned on my heels and walked back the way I came as long as I could take it. That prey feeling just killing me the whole time. With about half a mile to go I said duck it and ran it back as fast as I could. Max heart rate kind of running. Got in my car and even then I couldn't shake that feeling. It's like I wasn't out of range until I got a good deal down the road, and even then it took some time to cool down. Something about that feeling is different. I've never had it just like that before. It was so real, rather than a product of imagination. There was nothing like it, and that feeling of helplessness, man. I get it. That's what prey feels like just before being caught. I still run there. Most days I don't even think about that feeling, even when I pass the spot on the trail where it happened. It's very possible my brain just freaked out on me and my imagination got the best of me. But those instinct feeling are there for survival, and that feeling I got was so instinctual, rather than psychological. If it was bogus, that's just fine with me. If it was real. Redditor 115, never mess with the Fae. Redditor 116, Jesus Christ, reading this was a bad choice. Totally not recommended before going to sleep, but at the same time I can't stop. Redditor 117, I have told this one before, but years ago, when my dog died, I went to bed really upset. She had died of cancer and we had her put down. That night I had a vivid dream about my dog. In the dream I was walking with her in a big green field. At the end of the walk she laid down and all these little children started climbing on her, playing. She looked at me for a long time and then I started to walk away. I think she was saying to me that she is gone now, that she's looking after children and that she's happy. At the end of that dream I never felt so upset about her going again. She didn't have cancer in the dream, she could walk fine and she was telling me not to be upset anymore. I love Hesta 20. Redditor 118, I have no personal story, however, I believe that Skinwalker's Walker may be something you want to look into.